Alexander Bell, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I saw you on YouTube and I loved what I saw. It was an amazing video. Don't know specifically which video it was, but you had a lot of interesting things to say, and I'm going to give you the floor now to talk about whatever you want to talk about regarding why society has been shut down and why people are being censored and all the rest. And I guess we can use the word Antichrist. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can use that word and go from there. I will not interrupt you. I will put myself on mute. So,
no, please feel free. If there's anything, if there's anything you want, any specific point I mentioned that you want to step in and ask me about.
I don't have Alex Jones-itis. I don't interrupt.
Don't worry.
I guess.
I'm just glad to be on the show. So anything you want to ask me, you can interrupt me and ask me. It's totally fine.
Okay.
So so you mentioned the Antichrist. I'll start with the Antichrist because, some would say we're going through biblical times. There is dramatic change happening, and there is unfortunately a sinister agenda happening. Now, I'm not one to focus on the darkness. That's not my style. That's not my interest. My field of interest really is God and experiencing God and divine truth. Experiencing the reality of divine truth. So not just believing things that people tell you, or not just believing spiritual information, but actually opening up to the divine truth, which you can call God. People call it other things, but I call it God. So that's my real field of interest is being open and receptive to divine truth, which obviously fills us with joy, fills us with light, fills us with happiness, and connects us to this, the most powerful source of energy in the universe. And, we're meant to be connected to that. Obviously, it's what we've been designed for. And so my whole life, well, not my whole life, in the past 20 years since I first stepped on the spiritual path, has been about coming closer to that divine force, coming closer to God, and, understanding it on an experiential level so I could experience more and more of divine truth. That's my passion is experiencing divine truth, and also then communicating to others how they can also experience divine truth, which means letting go of fear, letting go of all the obstacles to divine truth, like anger and judgment and hostility and all the mental confusion, all the mental obstacles. So that's my real passion is experiencing God and helping others, talking to others about how they can come closer to God. So, I should tell you here I'm a born-again Christian, but I'm a very, you might say, an unconventional Christian, because, for me, as I said earlier, it's about experience. It's not about just believing what's written in a book, or just believing what you're being told, or just believing some kind of belief system. It's really about being open to the truth and what the truth wants to bring you to. We're guided in certain directions. When we're open to truth, when we're open to God, then God guides us in certain directions, and he brings us to become aware of certain things. So he gives us realizations, spiritual realizations, or spiritual inspiration, you could call it. And that comes from being in God's presence. And of course, my wife is a very traditional Christian. She loves the Bible. She reads it avidly every single day, and she finds so much power. And power is the best word. She finds so much power in the Bible. It just blows her mind, and she gets scriptures popping in her head out of nowhere. So she's a very traditional Christian. She loves reading the Bible. And I value the Bible very much. I just don't read it as much as I could do. So I'm a very scientific person. I like to experience things for myself and then decide what's true for my own experiences. So it's very much an experiential knowledge, and that's my understanding of God has come from my experiences. I was, I think, from the age of 18 years old, I was meditating. I started meditating, and following spiritual gurus at the age of 18, from the age of 18 onwards, and going to many different places and sitting with teachers. So I was meditating from the age of 18 for many, many years, and some very intense processes and very powerful experiences. And so my knowledge and experience of God came from meditation, from kind of going deeper into myself, kind of clearing myself of all the mental debris and mental fear and the mental baggage and all the obstacles in my mind. I had to kind of dig through all of those and kind of clear my mind, clear my consciousness, and then I became aware of God's reality, and I became aware of what God is like, and all I wanted was to be there, be in that space more, be with God more, because obviously it's what we're designed for. Every human being has been designed to experience God's love and God's light and God's power and God's joy. All of these things come from God. So that's all I've been interested in for about, since the age of 18. That's my focus, and it's still my focus. So I wanted to say all that because obviously there are some very serious and quite sinister and dark things happening. That's not my focus. My focus is on what God wants from me, what God wants me to do with my life. So really, I kind of gear my life around God's guidance. So I'm always asking God, or what you could call divine truth, what should I do? What's the best decision to make? What's the best direction to go in here? Should I do this or should I not do this? Should I say this or should I not say this? I'm very much guided to a very fine degree about what God guides me to do. So God is my focus. But however, since I became a born-again Christian, let me see now, about 8 years ago, then I became more aware of the reality of what you would call, or what the Bible calls, Satan. Now, I was always aware of the sinister agendas in the world. I think from the age of 22, when my mind was first opened, I had a very powerful experience at the age of 22, which was pretty terrifying and pretty scary for me. I was quite innocent and young at the age of 22, and it was quite a revelation. And I realized, that there are some very sinister and dark agendas in the world. And so as soon as I realized that, as soon as I had that experience, I became aware of what's going on in the media. I became super aware of messages in the media and how the media is being used in a very negative way to put out certain messages into society, to guide people in a certain direction, to spread fear, and all these things. I became much more aware of the dark agendas in the media, and that society wasn't just run by this government who want you to be happy and want you to be healthy and want you to be free, that the government is actually has a completely different agenda. So at the age of 22, I realized this, and then I really jumped on kind of, what would I say? I kind of intensified my spiritual practices and my spiritual pursuits, and meditated with a teacher. Went to live in Portugal to live with a teacher. So then I just progressively I kind of got more awareness or more knowledge of the dark side, the presence of the dark side, because my focus was on the light and on God and on everything that God gives me. But I became more aware. In that process, I became more aware that there's this other force, which the Bible calls Satan, or which you could call evil or spiritual darkness. I became more aware that there is this other force, which actually does have intelligence, and it has a plan, it has an agenda, and it's doing everything it can. It's using everything it can in society to spread that agenda far and wide. It's using the media. It's using everything we've got. It's using technology. I'd say primarily the media and technology are its main vessels, its main tools for propagating itself and spreading fear, because its main method of propagating itself is fear. So, if you're immune to fear, you're essentially immune to spiritual darkness, and you're immune to evil, and you're immune to what the Bible would call Satan. So fear is how that dark force tries to get into our mind. It can only get into our hearts through our mind. And so what it does, it tries to it sows the seeds of fear, and then we start thinking in fearful ways, and that basically opens the door for spiritual darkness to get into our heart. So I became aware of this, I don't know, many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, and I became aware that I had a lot of fear in me. And so my process, I realized the most important process I could go on my journey, was to become immune to fear, to release the fear. And that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to get rid of the fear from my system so that I could really embody the light, embody truth, divine truth, embody God, be fearless, experience more joy, and be courageous. So that's kind of been my focus, my personal focus for the past 15 years, is really seeing the fear that's in my heart and seeing how my mind tries to generate fear in my heart. So it's basically, you could call the ego a fear machine. So it's basically a mechanism for generating fear. The ego is all about fear. And without fear, the ego doesn't need to exist. Because without the ego, we're guided by divine truth. We're guided by the divine will. And if we're not afraid of divine will, if we have no fear of God's will, then there's no obstacle. Everything just flows perfectly and everything flows beautifully when we trust where God is leading us and what God is kind of encouraging us to do. If we trust that fully, then the ego is not needed. The ego is basically a mechanism of control, a mechanism of fear, which basically wants to step in and take God's place. And so the ego kind of becomes the false god. We worship the ego and what the ego tells us and what the ego tells us about ourselves. So the ego becomes our surrogate god. But obviously, the ego can only bring a very limited, fearful reality to us. It can't bring freedom. It can't bring divine truth. It can't bring joy and ecstasy and bliss and connection with God. The ego can't do any of those things. So as long as we're listening to the ego, we're going to be separate from God. And so in some way, you could say that the ego is like a creation of the devil, or it's a creation of darkness to keep us enslaved to fear. Because essentially that's what the ego does. Because without fear, the ego isn't there. So I learned all these things. You know, it's been a long, long journey. It seems like a very long journey since the age of, say, 22, when I really intensified my spiritual practice. I'm 41 now, by the way, just 41 years of age. So it's been about 20 years of intense spiritual practice. And I came, as I said earlier, I've been following God's guidance for at least 15 years since I realized God's reality. I've been following, kind of taking my cues from God and been listening to God, because I know, and I've seen so many times, over thousands and thousands of times, that God knows best about what I need. God knows best about which direction I need to go in. So it's really foolish for me to think that I know best, or try and make a decision that I think is better than what the decision that God could make for me if I just ask for his guidance. So let me try and remember where I was going with this. So let me just think. I've lost my train of thought there, but what was I saying before I...
Well, it's okay. Everybody has their own perspective of what God is. And
Yeah.
I have always said that, well, rights come from the Creator. So everything that we do, as long as we don't harm others, do no harm. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. So
Yeah.
regarding rights, everybody has the right to do anything that they want, as long as they do not cause harm to another person or property through their negligence or deliberate intent.
Yeah.
And the problem is that society does not seem to recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, people want freedom. Everyone wants to have freedom, and they want to have the right to live their life the way they want. They want to have the freedom to choose. Now the big problem we have with freedom is that, or what we're experiencing and what we're seeing in the world with freedom, is that means that people feel they have the freedom to do whatever they want and justify it as being beneficial. So basically, it comes down. People get caught up in, well, what's harmful to others. Some people say that being politically incorrect and saying politically incorrect things, it hurts other people. It hurts their feelings, and so that you shouldn't be politically incorrect because you're upsetting people. If you say something which is politically incorrect, then you're hurting that person's feelings, and so you shouldn't have the freedom just to say whatever you want, because obviously you can cause harm with your words. So it's a very blurred line about what does cause harm and what doesn't cause harm, and it's a debate that you see all over the internet going on for many years about what you should be allowed to say and what you shouldn't be allowed to say. But what I would like to say here now is that I was talking about the dark agenda. There is definitely a dark agenda in society, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that with what's going on with the pandemic. We're seeing that there is more control being kind of foisted upon people. People are realizing they're having their freedoms taken away, and they're seeing. I think a lot of people are seeing that the pandemic is being used as like a vehicle to take away their freedom and control them. And so more and more, our freedoms are being taken away in the name of what's good for everybody else. So, for example, with the lockdown and people not being allowed to leave their houses, well, of course, you could say, well, I'm not free to leave my house. I should be free to leave my house. But then the government say, well, yes, but if you leave your house, you could be a threat to somebody else. You could make somebody else sick. You could infect somebody. So we have to take away your freedom for the benefit of everybody else. And so this mentality of taking away people's freedoms and taking away people's rights for the benefit of all those other people who might be affected, that's how we're losing more and more of our freedom. But the important thing to remember is the most important freedom is the freedom in your mind and the freedom in your heart. So obviously the freedom in your mind, you might think, well, that means I'm free to think whatever I want to think and free to have my own opinions. And of course, nobody can stop you having your own opinions. But real freedom, like real freedom of mind, isn't about thought. Real freedom of mind is about the space, not being limited by thoughts. Because the whole realm of thinking, the whole realm of thought, it limits our consciousness. So we get trapped in this whole world of thought, which is basically the ego's world. We get trapped in that realm of thought. And all that's on offer to us is more thought and more thought. We might have this thought, we might pendulum swing to the other side and have the other thought and think we're free to think whatever we want to. But we won't find any freedom in thought, because that's the ego's realm. The ego operates on thought. And essentially, I'd say 99% of thought is fear-based. So we have the freedom. The freedom of mind is really about being free of thoughts, so that our mind is like an open sky, and there's no obstacles, there's no limiting thoughts, there's no limiting beliefs. Because of course, even the nicest beliefs, even the most positive beliefs, they still limit us because it's a belief system. And so we have to adhere to this system. So if we want true freedom, well, first of all, we need to realize that we're not confined to thinking. We're not confined to the realm of thought, that there is a whole universe, a whole spacious universe, a whole sky open to us. And when our mind is free from all these thoughts, positive and negative, then we feel just such an expansive relief in our mind. I mean, I'm not sure relief is the right word, but it's like taking the blinkers off. You know what I mean? So suddenly you see the world, your perception opens up to this vast horizon, this endless vista, just from stepping out of the realm of thought. And so that's something I learned a long time ago, at the beginning of my spiritual journey, was that Well, I don't have to be trapped in thought. There is another world outside of my thoughts. And I think that's really important for people to understand, because the media and our culture bombards us with so many thoughts and so many opinions, and it tells us these opinions are good, and if you have these thoughts, you're a good person, and if you have those thoughts, you're a bad person. But essentially, it's still keeping us imprisoned in the realm of thought, which is dualistic. So you can have good and bad and right and wrong and nice thoughts and nasty thoughts. And people think, oh, well, as long as I stay on the nice thoughts and as long as I stay with the friendly thoughts, then I'm a good person. But still, you're imprisoned by thoughts. You're still relying on the thoughts for your identity, for your sense of who you are, and for your sense of goodness in your heart. Because obviously, as human beings, we all want to have this feeling in our heart, this feeling of goodness, this feeling of love, a feeling of contentment. It's so important, it's integral to every human being to have this feeling in our heart of some kind of a positive sense of warmth and love and purpose in our heart. It's crucial, it's so crucial. And if we haven't got that, then we start looking for things in the material world. Then we start looking for belief systems that give us a sense of belonging, or belief systems that make us feel happy, or belief systems that make us feel excited or give us something to look forward to. But we don't need those belief systems if we open our heart to what you could say divine goodness, open our heart to divine love. And no belief systems are needed, no thoughts are needed to do that. You just have to let go of the fear. And so this is why this dark agenda in society is bombarding us with fear. And you can see it more than ever. I mean, I've been studying the media extremely carefully for maybe 17 years, looking at the messages in the media, looking at what the agenda is. And this includes Hollywood films, TV programs, adverts, cartoons, magazines, books, children's video games. I've been studying the media very, very carefully for over 15 years and seeing what messages the media is putting out and seeing if there's any kind of pattern or theme. And it became extremely obvious to me in the first few months of opening my eyes to what the media is doing, that there is a huge agenda to spread fear via the media. And essentially that's, when you're spreading fear, you're spreading spiritual darkness. That's inevitable. If you spread fear, you're spreading spiritual darkness. And if you share love, and if you share joy, and if you share enthusiasm, you're spreading spiritual light. So obviously the media was being used to spread spiritual darkness. And so it became very clear to me that there is a battle. There's a spiritual battle going on in the world. Now, you don't have to describe it in biblical terms. You don't have to say it's Satan versus Jesus or Satan versus God. You could say it's just the light, the intelligent light versus the intelligent darkness. It's good versus evil. Now, this is very, very clearly happening in the world, and you can see that the media now is being very much harnessed by the forces of darkness, the forces of evil, those who have bad intentions, those who want to be in control of humanity, who want humanity to be weak and vulnerable and kind of on its knees, are using the media to spread fear like never before. And as I say, I've been watching the media very, very closely, and never before in the last 2 years, I've seen a dramatic acceleration in the darkness of the messages being put out via the media, especially in Hollywood films and TV programs. So much intensely dark information. And one really notable one really notable example of this is how Satanism is specifically being marketed now via the mainstream media, not just to adults, but to young children. I did a YouTube video in January called The Sinister Messages Reaching All Children. And, the information that came to me for that video blew my mind. It's basically just a video of loads of different TV programs that are on mainstream TV, loads of different films, loads of different children's TV programs, loads of different children's games, all of which are specifically promoting Satanism. Now, that might sound extreme to many people, that the media is promoting Satanism to young children. But if you saw the video, it's on my YouTube channel. It was posted in January. If you saw the video, you'll realize that this is actually happening. Satanism is being sold to young children and to older children as well, but specifically to young children, especially to young girls. And there's a reason for this. And this kind of opens up a whole nother, you could say, a can of worms, if you want to say it like that. But getting into this this aspect of things will lead me to the Antichrist and lead me to the anti-Christian agenda, or the Antichrist agenda, which is essentially to spread darkness and for people to embrace darkness. Now, the best example I can give you of people embracing darkness, or a society embracing darkness or embracing evil, is what happened in Nazi Germany. So obviously in the late 1920s, 1930s, when Hitler came to power, he was super popular. You know, everyone loved him. He was offering a new way, a new start for Germany. He was offering hope and massive change. People were, very deflated, and he came along with this enthusiasm and passion and offered great change. And he was incredibly popular. We have to remember that Hitler was incredibly popular with the German people because he spoke all the right things. He said all the right things. He appeared to be a guy who cared, a guy who was passionate, a man of the people, all these are qualities of the Antichrist, which I'll get onto in a moment. But Hitler was such a popular man, and he put a lot of energy into indoctrinating the children. And one of his most notable quotes regarding this is, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future. He alone who owns the youth gains the future." So he was, from the early 1920s, when he got into power, his focus was putting out messages to the young people, indoctrinating the young people from a young age, so that they would grow up thinking like he did. So they would grow up year after year, getting more and more strong messages. So they would grow up with the belief system that he wanted them to have. So he obviously had this evil and dark agenda to kill millions of people and to get rid of the Jews from Germany. And he knew he had that agenda, and he knew he needed people. He knew he needed millions of people to help him do that. And so he started indoctrinating the young people from a very young age and putting out anti-Jewish messages and basically creating anti-Jewish sentiment in the hearts of all these people, because you can't really do that in the older people, because they know who they are, they know their values, they know their belief system. So if Hitler comes into Germany, he's not going to waste too much energy on trying to indoctrinate, people over the age of 30, because they know what's right and wrong, and they know what's good and what's not good. So he focused on indoctrinating the young people so that they would grow up in 10, 15 years as his army, who believed what he believed and who felt the same way he did, who hated the Jews. And so obviously what unfolded in Nazi Germany was an act of evil on a society-wide level. A whole society embraced evil. Now, of course, I'm aware that there are probably millions and millions of people in Germany who thought what Hitler was doing was despicable. I'm sure there were, and I'm sure there are many people who weren't on board, but they kind of were forced to go along with what was happening, because there wasn't any choice in Nazi Germany. It was a dictatorship, so it was either you get on board or you die, or you don't get treated, you get put into prison, or a prisoner of war camp. So basically, he had the whole society practicing evil. In what was going on in Nazi Germany was evil on a grand scale, and there were people doing it. Now, you wouldn't say these people were evil because they were just following orders. They'd been indoctrinated from a young age just to believe what their leader, Hitler, was telling them. So they just believed him. They believed every word. They thought like he did. They believed everything he told them. They saw the world in the same way he did, and yet they saw the Jews in the same way he did. So they think they were doing evil. You see, they believed, most of them probably believed, that this was the right thing to do. However, of course, with hindsight, we can see that it was horrendously evil what happened in Nazi Germany. And so the whole society, the whole mentality and psyche of Nazi Germany was harnessed to propagate evil deeds. Now, the reason this is very, very important is because, and this is the most important thing I want to discuss with you and share with the listeners, exactly the same thing is happening right now in society with regards to the Antichrist. And like I said, I've been studying the media very, very carefully, and the media is now being harnessed to put out a wealth, an abundance of dark satanic messages to young people. So young people are being targeted, and they're being kind of educated with satanic information. There's a program on Netflix called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is meant to be aimed over 13-year-olds, but of course it's watched by much younger children. And it's one of the most disturbing, violent, dark, and brutal programs you can imagine watching. I mean, fortunately, I haven't watched too much of it because I'm quite sensitive to these things, and I don't want to put those kind of images in my mind. But I've trawled through like hundreds of reviews of people who've watched it, and even adults are saying this is disgusting, this is really, really brutal, and it's just selling Satanism to young children. So you've got this program called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is about a group of witches who, and their daughter is called Sabrina, and she's basically on her 16th birthday, she has got to give her soul to the devil. She's got to sign her soul over to the devil. Now this program is all about Satanism. When something good happens, the witches all say, praise Satan, and this program paints Satanism in a really positive light. And it actually paints Christianity in a really negative light, like, you know, it paints it as the enemy of freedom. So this program, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, is from Netflix. It's quite a big, it's in its 3rd or 4th series now. It's quite big, it's very, very popular. It's aimed at teenage girls, and it's basically promoting Satanism as a way of being empowered. It's promoting Satanism as female empowerment. Now, this is also happening with the Satanic Temple, who are going to release a film called Hail Satan, or they might have released it already, but it's either being released this year or it's just been released. A film called Hail Satan, which again paints Satanism in a really positive light. Now, I've been researching Satanism since I first learned that it was going on, you know, in mainstream society. I've been researching it for about 15 years. And I know how brutal and evil and dark and just horrific satanic practices are, and how dark and anti-human satanic beliefs are. So when you've got programs in the media and you've got organizations like the Satanic Temple selling Satanism to young people as a really cool thing, as really liberating and empowering, this is the work of darkness. This is the work of evil, to promote Satanism to young people as a positive thing, when it's actually the opposite. You know, I've also done a little bit of research, and I've interviewed people about satanic ritual abuse, which is basically satanic practices are what Satanists do. Satanists have their spiritual practices, which basically involve human torture, human sacrifice, child abuse, and all these things. So satanic, the whole realm of Satanism is as dark as it gets. It doesn't get any darker than the satanic abuse and satanic beliefs. Yet in the mainstream media, there are so many examples. I can't list them all now, but I've made several videos. And if you look on my YouTube channel, there's a playlist called Evidence Videos. And there's a whole playlist of videos which show you the satanic messages being put out in children's media right now. And Netflix is the main perpetrator. There are so many dark programs on Netflix which are actively promoting Satanism to young children. And of course, we can't have this conversation without mentioning Billie Eilish phenomenon, because obviously Billie Eilish is possibly the #1 most famous singer in the world now. And of course, she's extremely popular with teenage girls. I think most of her fan base between the age of 10 and 18, but obviously some of them are younger and some of them are older, but they worship her. I've made some videos about some of the really dark messages which are in Billy's songs and in her videos. And if you've seen any of them, you'll know that they are really, really dark, and they are openly promoting satanic, demonic possession. Like the video Bury a Friend openly portrays demonic possession throughout the whole video. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much satanic messages and imagery coming through her songs. And even in her song called All the Good Girls Go to Hell, the opening line is, "My Lucifer is lonely." So obviously it's satanic, it's Luciferian. And so these the messages that Billie Eilish is putting out are reaching millions and millions of young girls, and she is popular beyond belief. I mean, her YouTube videos have reached billions and billions of views. I think she's got something like over 50 million followers on Instagram. But the interesting thing here is I've been making videos about the messages in Billie Eilish's songs and Billie Eilish's videos. I've been trying to warn young people because I've got 4 children. One of them's 15, one of them's 11 years old, the other one's 9, and one of them is 6. I've got 4 children, and I'm very, very concerned about children. I mean, I've been working with children since I was a teenager, looking after kids. And so I care about children a great, great deal. So when I'm seeing the messages, which are in kids' media, actively promoting Satanism, and there are many, many examples, when I'm seeing these messages, I'm thinking of all these poor girls who are watching these programs, watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, listening to all Billie Eilish's music very carefully and watching her videos, and what this is doing to them, what it's doing to their mind, what it's doing to their belief system, what it's doing to their view of what is right and what is wrong is very, very serious. It's very serious, and it's not accidental. And this comes back to the Antichrist, which I will get onto in a second. But I just want to say this one thing, that I've been making videos trying to warn young people about these dark messages in Billie Eilish's songs, saying, look, watch out, these are really dark messages. She's singing about Satanism. Be careful. And the comments I've had on these videos, and I've been very careful not to be hateful, because I'm not a hateful person. I'm just a caring, concerned person. So I was very careful not to put any hateful comments about Billie Eilish. But the messages that I've got back from the Billie Eilish fans are, "Oh, Billie's wonderful. She's our queen. How can you hate on Billie? How can you say such hateful things towards Billie? She's not putting out satanic messages. She's just expressing herself." And so this is what really concerns me, is that millions and millions of children, they are absorbing these very, very dark satanic messages, not just from Billie, but from so many other pop singers. There's so much Satanism in the pop industry now, it's beyond belief. And of course, in Hollywood and in TV programs, there's so much of it. But the young people, they don't seem to realize they're being sold Satanism. They're kind of absorbing it and thinking, this is kind of cool, this is kind of interesting. The darkness is appealing. And this is a specific and intentional agenda in the media and by the powers that kind of have the media in their hands, is to sell darkness as appealing, to make it seem kind of mysterious and exciting. So young people, they turn away from goodness, and so the media wants to paint goodness and purity as a bad thing. You don't want to be pure, you don't want to have a pure heart, because a pure heart is boring, or it's whatever, it's very negative. You want a dark heart, you want a heart which likes the darkness, which wants to do evil things, which wants to do bad things. And so these messages across the board that darkness is good and you should embrace the darkness. Again, a lot of examples of this are in my YouTube videos. It's hard to remember them off the top of my head. But if you go to the top 10, here's a little experiment you can do. Go to the top 10 in America or in the UK, the top 10 pop songs. Okay, and look at each pop song and go onto Google and read the lyrics for each of the songs in the top 10. And you'll see exactly what I mean. They're singing about darkness, they're singing about misery, they're singing about hopelessness, they're singing about pessimism, they're singing about fear, and they're singing about evil and there's songs which specifically speak about demons. It's just kind of exploded. In the last 2 years, the degree to which the media is promoting darkness and pessimism and evil and selling this to young kids as interesting and exciting, it's everywhere. Excuse me, deep breath, because I know I've been saying a lot on this subject, but it's really crucial to understand what's going on right now, because I told you that Hitler was indoctrinating the young people. Hitler was specifically indoctrinating the young people because he knew that was how he would succeed in his agenda to kill millions and millions of Jews, to create a generation of people, of young people, who didn't like the Jews, who hated the Jews, who thought Germany would be better off without the Jews. Okay, so this is where it all comes together. The Antichrist, who is mentioned in the Bible, but I've seen the Antichrist agenda in the media for many, many years, even before I was interested in reading the Bible. The Antichrist does not have, like Hitler did, an anti-Jewish agenda. The Antichrist, of course, staying true to his name, has an anti-Christian agenda. So if you can imagine what happened in Nazi Germany, now this takes a bit of a stretch of imagination, but this is the agenda. If you can imagine what happened in Nazi Germany with the Jews happening on a global scale, but not with the Jews, with the Christians. If you can imagine Christian persecution, worldwide Christian persecution, and similar things to what happened to the Jews happening all around the world, and with the Christians being painted as the bad guys, with the Christians being painted as the enemies of tolerance, the enemies of freedom, the enemies of inclusiveness. And we're seeing this, if you've been watching the media carefully over the past 4 or 5 years, you can see that the Christians are very much being painted as intolerant because of course in the Bible it says that homosexuality is a sin. Then that's really been focused on as a key part of Christianity. And so with the whole LGBTQ, with the whole LTG, I can't remember the letters, LGBTQ agenda growing, with the whole popularity of, I'm not sure if popularity is the right word, but with the LGBTQ movement getting stronger and stronger and stronger, then more and more the Christians are being painted as the enemies of a tolerant society, the enemies of freedom, the enemies of an inclusive society. And so this is the agenda. I'll lay out the agenda for you specifically, step by step, because it's very specific. It's not just unfolding randomly. It's being orchestrated, and it's being it's being brought in to society step by step. And the ultimate agenda is to get the whole millions and millions of people, or the whole of society, seeing Christianity as something really bad, something which is very detrimental to our society, something that society would be better off without. So that's exactly what happened in Nazi Germany. Hitler persuaded people that the society would be better off without Jewish people and the Jewish religion. And so this is why Satanism is being sold to the young people. And you have to trust me. I mean, if you watch the videos on my YouTube channel, it'll become undeniably obvious. But if you haven't seen them, you'll have to trust me that the degree of satanic information and the promotion of Satanism in the media is off the scale. I mean, it's off the scale. And so the reason young people are being targeted with Satanism is because Satanism directly opposes Christianity. Satanism is the anti-Christian religion. So Satanists now are calling themselves a religion, and they believe they should have the same rights as any religion out there. They should have the right to practice their practices, which, by the way, are extremely dark, but they pretend, the satanic groups pretend that they don't really practice any dark satanic practices, and they don't really believe in a real Satan. I mean, that's what they say, because of course they're not going to admit openly to the world that they worship the devil. because that brings up all the practices, all the darker things that are associated with devil worship. So no society really wants devil worship to flourish. So they don't admit that they worship the devil. They just say, we just believe in freedom. We just believe in supporting, oppressed people. We believe in human rights. So the Satanic Temple are promoting themselves as a human rights organization, and they're getting more and more popularity. But the demographic in society with whom they're becoming most popular is the young people. And that's intentional. They want the young people to be into Satanism. And this is why you've got programs like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, which promotes and sells Satanism in a very positive light. This is why Billie Eilish has become a superstar, despite her videos and songs being unbelievably disturbing. I mean, the fact that nobody in the media, no prominent voice in the media has stood up and said, excuse me, but don't you think Billie's songs are a little bit dark? And don't you think her videos are a little bit unsuitable for teenage girls? Nobody has said that. But if you just watch a few videos, you'll be shocked. If you've never seen her videos, you'll be shocked how dark they are. But nobody's saying anything because there is a satanic agenda in the media. So not only is the media now spreading fear, which it's been doing for a long time, but now it's spreading intense fear, but it's specifically promoting Satanism to the younger generations. And this is across the board. It's selling it in video games. It's promoting Satanism in video games. It's promoting it in Lego. You would not believe that Lego now has a Lego, what's it called now? It's got a Lego theme. It's called the dark side, or it's called hidden side. And it's all satanic. You would not believe that there would be satanic Lego would be used to sell Satanism to young people, but it's absolutely true that Lego are now promoting satanic imagery and satanic symbolism to young people via this hidden side, which they call it hidden side. And there's just countless other examples where Satanism has entered the mainstream. And Fortnite, the game Fortnite, which is obviously popular with children all over the globe and has been promoted like no other video game in history, there is so much subtle satanic symbolism in that game, which young children are getting it, and they're just getting acclimatized. So the whole point of this, the whole agenda, is to acclimatize young children and teenagers also just to the dark side, acclimatize them to this realm of the darkness, rather than get them seeking the light and seeking spiritual freedom and seeking divine inspiration, which of course is fantastic for young children to do and young people to do. Rather than promote that, that doesn't even get a look in. The media is being harnessed to promote interest in the darkness, interest in the occult, interest in Satanism. And it's because of the Antichrist agenda. The Antichrist is building his army. The Antichrist is building his army of young people, just like Hitler did, who will follow him and who will listen to him and who will think, yeah, I like your message. I believe in your message. Because his message is going to become quite dark. So I'll explain the psychology of the Antichrist himself and how he's going to operate. So basically, in the Bible, I mean, I'm not an expert on the Antichrist from the Bible. I'm an expert, you would say, on how it's unfolding in our society and how the media is being used and the psychology that's being implemented in society to get people ready for this Antichrist agenda. You could call it the New World Order, by the way. Some people call it the New World Order. It's like global communism, Brave New World, or 1984. All this kind of dark vision of society, that's the Antichrist agenda. That's the agenda, that's the world that the Antichrist or the Satanic agenda wants us to live in. And it wants us to live in there, and it's doing everything it can to shepherd society in that direction. And the Antichrist, as an individual, as a human being, is key to leading everyone into this agenda and getting everyone behind him. Because then when everyone supports him, when everyone's behind him, just like when everyone got behind Hitler, you have to understand, everyone thought, yes, this man is going to bring change to our nation. This man is the way forward. This man is going to lead us into a new era. Okay, and so everyone was behind him and everyone followed his orders. And then suddenly everyone realized, oh my goodness, he's killing millions of Jews. And then it was too late. And then they were in the system. It was firmly established in the German society. There was no escape. This man was in control and there was no escape. And so it's just the same with the Antichrist. Hitler's like a blueprint for the Antichrist, that he is going to get everyone behind him. Everyone's going to say, this man is great. I love this guy. He's so kind. He's so caring. He's so charismatic. He's going to lead us forward into this new era of peace, a new era of compassion, a new era of tolerance and equality. These are all the buzzwords he'll use: tolerance, inclusivity, equality. And this man is going to inspire everybody. And he is already inspiring everybody. And I'll tell you in just a moment the exact identity of this man, because this man is one of the most popular actors on the planet, one of the most popular human beings on this planet. This man is currently doing what Hitler was doing in the 1930s. He is selling himself as a man of the people, a man who cares, a man who stands for equality, a man who stands for compassion, a man who cares about everybody, a man who will lead society into a new era of peace. Now, these are the messages he's putting out, and this is his kind of promise. This is what he's going to be promising people and what he is promising people. And of course, it sounds good to everyone, because everybody wants to believe that someone will save our society. When people are seeing what's happening with the pandemic and with the creeping in of communism or socialism and the loss of freedom and the rioting in America, everyone is thinking, oh my goodness, where is this all going? Where is this going to lead us? We need a savior. We need someone to stand up and lead this world in compassion and love, who's going to solve our problems, who's going to get rid of all the hatred and get rid of all the negativity. And so there's this great thirst now, just as there was in Nazi Germany, there's this great thirst, and the thirst is increasing. And it's going to increase more and more. So there's this great hunger for a new leader to emerge and lead the nation, and not only the American nation, because he's an American man, but lead the world into this new era of hope and optimism and tolerance and inclusivity and compassion. So I'm going to tell you who this guy is. Now, I just must warn you that he is the most popular man in the world. I think one of the most popular men in the world. He's the most popular Hollywood actor in the world. And many people are going to say, no way, this isn't possible. But let me just remind you, okay, first of all, let me just say that I know with 100% certainty that this is correct. I would never, ever say something like this about a human being unless I was 100% certain. And I've been studying this and watching the media for over 15 years, looking out for the deceiver, looking out for these people who are going to try and manipulate the masses. And I've been watching this guy for 2 years now. And so I wouldn't say what I'm about to say without knowing with absolute certainty that he is the man, he is the Antichrist, he is the man who's going to stand up and suggest himself as their leader, the leader to take them into this new era of hope and peace. So firstly, I'm not speculating, I'm not guessing, it's not just my opinion. I promise you, this is the man, and I will say that unequivocally, this is the man who's going to be the Antichrist. Secondly, it's going to be hard for some people to swallow this because they really, really like him. And just remember that in Nazi Germany, people really, really liked Hitler. He was extremely popular. Everyone wanted him in power. They liked him. He was charismatic. He was inspiring. He was a very, very popular and likable guy. So we have to remember that the Antichrist is going to be extremely popular, so popular that almost the whole world will love him, and they'll see him as a figure of goodness, a figure of positivity and a figure of hope for a new future. So people aren't going to like hearing who it is, and I will probably, there'll probably be a lot of negativity towards me, or I'll become unpopular for saying this, and not because I hate this guy. I'm not a man of hate, and I'm not a man of anger. I'm not a man of unkindness. I believe in those things very much, but I am a man of truth. So when I see a deception happening in the world, and it's very clear to me that there's a deception happening that's deceiving people, I'm compelled to speak up. It disturbs me to see people being deceived when I can see the deception myself. So this is why I'm saying this. I'm not saying this because I hate this guy. I'm very concerned about people being deceived by him, because I know where this all leads to. I know exactly where it leads to. I can see down the line, I can see down the road, and I can see the agenda, which is anti-Christian. Just like I said, it's like Hitler did with the Jews on a global scale, and with the Christians as the ones who are being persecuted. Now, many people out there listening to this might think, oh, good, I don't like the Christians. I wouldn't mind seeing them persecuted. But no, we shouldn't be thinking like this, because, just think of what happened to the Jews, the cruelty. We don't want cruelty in our world. We don't want no one deserves to be tortured. No one deserves to be killed, no matter what we might think of those people, and how much we might think they're insufferable, or how much we might think they're self-righteous and how they deserve a taste of their own medicine. Nobody deserves to be tortured or punished or killed. So we have to keep that in our mind when we hear about this anti-Christian agenda. We have to remember that nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves. It's horrible to live in a world where we justify cruelty to one demographic of society. Just ask anyone who grew up in Germany when the Jews are being tortured or being gassed. Ask them what it was like to witness that in their society. We don't want that. We don't want persecution of anybody, no matter what color their skin, no matter what their religious beliefs, no matter who they are, even if they're evil, like the Antichrist, even if they're evil, like the Satanists. I don't believe that it's right to persecute and torture and physically punish people. That's not the way. That's not the way of compassion. That's not the way of unconditional love. And I really firmly believe we should never make excuses for being cruel to other human beings or for other animals. We should never make excuses, because then we're opening the door to cruelty. So I believe it's really important that we have this very strict mental perspective where nobody deserves cruelty, no matter who they are, no matter what they've done. We don't want to live in an eye for an eye world, because as Gandhi said, an eye for an eye only leaves the whole world blind. So we want a different world. We want a world where there's no excuse for cruelty, no excuse, no matter people's religion, no matter what people have done, there's no excuse for cruelty. However, the anti-Christian agenda is going to ramp up. It's a process. It's not a sudden thing that's just going to happen tomorrow or next year. It's slowly, incrementally going to build and build to the point where people are going to be really resenting the Christian religion, really resenting the Christian people, and seeing them as the enemy, as I said earlier, to a free and tolerant society. Now, I'll just point out here, relating to this, that there are many examples of anti-Christian messages in popular culture, in films and in programs which are on TV. There are some specific and strong anti-Christian messages in some very well-known TV programs, and I'll tell you what they are. The first one is Handmaid's Tale, which I think is on Hulu. Now, you're probably familiar with that. It's very big and very popular. It's been in all the newspapers and being promoted very heavily. Now, I'm not going to comment on the program itself, but there is a very strong anti-Christian message. So that this program is being used to paint Christianity as really oppressive, and to make young people think that if we continue along with a kind of a Judeo-Christian society, then this is what's going to happen. We're going to end up with this Handmaid's Tale dystopia if we let the Christians carry on being in charge. then this is what's going to happen. And if you've seen The Handmaid's Tale, you know that it's pretty dark. So that's one example of a television program which is being used to propagate specifically anti-Christian messages. And of course, many people may think that some of those messages are accurate, that the church, the Christian religion, does do some negative things. But when you paint an entire religion as being kind of anti-human and oppressive, and sell that view to a whole generation of people, then that's really dangerous. That's propaganda. That is propaganda, and there is so much propaganda in the mainstream media now. So The Handmaid's Tale is one prominent example. Another example is, let me see now, in The Watchmen, which was on HBO. So again, just like in The Handmaid's Tale, the bad guys in The Watchmen are Christians. So this is just a subtle thing, that the bad guys, we're seeing more and more that the bad guys are Christians in programs. Another example is Hunters with Al Pacino. And again, it's, in that program, you see that it's connecting Christianity with white supremacy. And this is another thing that's happening in the media, is that young people, under 20-year-olds, I would say, are being taught that white supremacy and Christianity kind of go hand in hand. And so this is a very, very, it's totally untrue, of course, but it's also very dangerous to connect this very, very horrible belief system, which is white supremacism, to connect that with Christianity. And I know the Christian religion. I wouldn't say I'm a devout Christian. I am a born-again Christian, and I know lots and lots of Christians. But I'm not a typical Christian. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a very unconventional Christian. But I know lots of Christian people, and I know that Christianity is not a white supremacist religion in any way. I know that the Christians I know, and they're not all white people either, all the Christians I know are very, very open-hearted and humanitarian to everybody. But the media is connecting white supremacy with Christianity, and it's important to notice this. Because if you don't notice it, it might subtly be implanted in your mind that you connect, that you kind of take on board this belief system that Christianity and white supremacy are connected and they go hand in hand, which they don't. But the media is trying to get young people to connect white supremacy with Christianity. And as you can see in society right now with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, the kind of the racists and the white supremacists are, you might say, they're public enemy number one. They're being perceived as public enemy number one because of the cruelty and injustice that African American people have been experiencing. So because the white supremacists and the racists seems to be at the moment, they're public enemy number one, for good reason, of course, because we don't want white supremacy and we don't want racism in our world. But because that's so prevalent right now, and because they are, as I said, there's so much kind of anger towards those people, towards the racists and the white supremacists. If you then connect that with Christianity, if you connect racism with Christianity and white supremacism with Christianity, then you're channeling the anger of people towards Christianity. So this is like a psychological manipulation that's happening via the media. At the moment, it's very subtle. I'm seeing it everywhere, and I've seen it for a couple of years. But it's very subtle that people's anger towards racism and towards intolerance is now being subtly channeled towards Christianity, like it's part of the problem, if that makes sense. Because we know what the solution is. The solution, apparently, we're being told, is inclusivity and tolerance and equality. So those are the solutions. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is anything which stands in the way of that solution. And Christianity is being included very subtly as part of the problem. And this is the Antichrist agenda. This is because, obviously, the agenda is to persecute and to wipe out. Ideally, if this was to be completely successful, the ideal is to wipe out Christianity. Because Satanism hates Christianity. Satanism is diametrically opposed to everything that Christianity stands for. So Satanism hates goodness. It hates kindness. It hates love. Satanism hates purity of heart. This is why so many satanic practices are about defiling the heart, defiling the human body, defiling your humanity as an entire thing, because Satanism hates everything that Christianity stands for. It hates goodness. It hates the goodness that people have in their heart. It hates purity. It hates anything you associate with Christianity in a positive light. We can all think of positive attributes of Christianity, that it teaches us to love our neighbor. It teaches us to help the downtrodden. It teaches us to be compassionate. It teaches us all the things that Jesus embodied. If you imagine Jesus as a human being and all the things that he demonstrated, that he acted out, that we've learned about, Christianity is about those things. Of course, it's become very muddied and very tainted by a lot of other stuff. But if you just come back to Jesus as a human being, what he did and what he stood for and what his message was, well, that's Christianity. That's the essence of Christianity. It's about being a good, kind, pure-hearted person who cares for everyone without exception. Now, Satanism is the opposite. It hates those things. It hates everything that Jesus stands for. So Satanism wants to defile people. It wants people to get into darkness. It wants them to get into their lust. It wants them to get into all their carnal desires. Satanism wants people to turn their back on purity and embrace impurity. And it wants them to embrace, perversion and, sexual perversion and all these things. That's what Satanism is all about. But of course, that's not openly obvious from all the satanic programs and all the satanic things we're hearing from the Satanic Temple. They're promoting themselves in a very friendly and kind of kind way, as if they have good intentions. Satanists do not have good intentions. I have to say this, okay? I know Satanism. I know what it's about, and I know what they get up to. It is nothing. There's nothing good about it. Not one drop. So if there's any young people listening to this interview, which I hope there will be, please understand that Satanism is about deception. In the Bible, Satan is called the father of lies. So anything to do with Satanism, don't expect to hear the truth. Don't expect Satanists to tell you the truth about anything, because Satanism is about deception, which is essentially what the occult means. The occult means hidden. So the truth is hidden. The true intentions of Satanism is hidden. And there's this false view of Satanism that gets spread out to people for the purposes of propagating Satanism. So the Antichrist agenda is to propagate Satanism, to propagate this thirst for the darkness, so that the young people are ready for him. So I'm going to get to the point now, which is who the Antichrist is. And again, many people will not believe me. Many people think, no, this guy is too good. But I have to warn you. I have to warn you that this guy is a con man. This man, this famous actor, is a deceiver. He's an extremely good actor, and he's been acting for many, many years, trying to get people to see him as a good guy, a guy with a good heart. But please, I'm imploring all the listeners out there, I'm not asking you to believe me, but I'm asking you to consider what I'm about to tell you. And consider that maybe there's a chance that I am right. Because if we were in Nazi Germany right now, in the late 1920s, and we were on a radio show in the 1920s, and I was here saying, guys, watch out for that Hitler. He seems nice, he seems popular, but he's a bad guy and he's got bad intentions. People would look back and say, oh gosh, I wish I'd listened to that man. I wish I'd distanced myself from that guy Hitler, because that guy was right. So I'm asking you now, when I tell you who the identity of the Antichrist, please just consider that I might know exactly what I'm talking about, because I know this subject extremely well, back to front, inside and out, and I know the Antichrist agenda. And this man is the spearhead for the Antichrist agenda, who is seemingly promoting goodness, promoting change, promoting good values, to get everybody on board. He wants everybody behind him, everybody to support him. And that's why he's putting on this deceptive act of being a good guy. Because once everyone's supporting him, and once he's got your support, then basically, there's no turning back. So the Antichrist is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the famous Hollywood actor who has over 180 million Instagram subscribers. He is undoubtedly one of the most popular actors on the planet, and one of the most popular men on the planet. Remember what I've told you about popularity. Popularity means nothing. Popularity means that someone has succeeded in portraying a popular image of themselves, or a likable image of themselves. So if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is popular, it's only because he has succeeded in portraying a likable image of himself. It doesn't automatically mean he's a good guy. It doesn't automatically mean he's got a good heart just because he's popular. So I think like I said, I'm not going to try and persuade you to believe me, but what I am going to ask you to do, anyone who's listening to this, is to scrutinize everything he does carefully, and especially go onto his Instagram profile and watch his speeches, because in the last, in the last 3 weeks, he's been giving more and more political speeches. It's not just him speaking from his heart. They have a political message, and he's trying to get people on board his political agenda. And on one of his Instagram speeches on June the 4th, he uses a lot of subliminal language techniques. Okay, and I've studied language, I've studied linguistics, I've studied communication, I've studied psychology. So I recognize these techniques when I hear them and when I see them. And he is using, in his Instagram videos, which are political speeches, he is using linguistic manipulation techniques to kind of promote himself as the next leader. So you may have heard this in the news, that people are saying, we want Dwayne Johnson to be our next president. He's the leader we're all looking for. He's the man who's going to lead our country into an era of hope, an era of peace and equality. So he's using all the buzzwords, he's using all the political buzzwords to sound like he's the solution. He wants everyone to think that he is the leader who's going to make a difference, who's going to make the world a different place, who's going to lead them into this new world of equality and fairness and hope. So we have to remember, firstly, he is an actor. Okay, so when actors go into Hollywood, we have to be when Hollywood actors go into politics, we have to be extremely, extremely careful, because they are trained in deception. An actor is trained in deception. And politicians, well, we all know what politicians are like. Deception is like their middle name. They're only interested in getting popularity, in getting power. And now Dwayne Johnson has been indirectly suggesting to everybody that he might be their new leader. He might be the man to make the change that America needs, and to lead them out of this time of conflict and turbulence into this new age of peace. And it was unbelievable. I watched this video on June the 4th on his Instagram profile, and he was saying, you need a leader who will step forward and say to you, I care about you. I am the man. I love you. I'm going to make a difference. I won't rest until until my last breath, until I make this country great. Blah, blah, blah. Typical political rhetoric, which we've all heard time and time again. Well, it's all now spewing out of his mouth. And he's very cleverly using very clever language techniques, indirectly suggesting himself as the leader. And the comments, if you looked at the comments below that video, everyone is desperate for him to be the next president of the United States. And you can look at them for yourself, and you can look at his videos, and you can see that this man, the people are desperate for him to be their new leader. Now, of course, none of this proves that he's the Antichrist, and I can't prove to you that he's the Antichrist. What I can do is ask you to watch everything he says, every speech he makes on his Instagram profile, and analyze them to see if he is being genuine or if he is acting. So I believe that every human being is capable of recognizing genuine behavior and capable of recognizing acting of false behavior. I think there's something in every human being who, if they look carefully and this kind of look with a skeptical eye, I believe that people will be able to recognize if this man is being genuine or if he's acting. Now, I know he's acting. I know he is. And I've seen the political messages that he's subtly weaving into his speeches. And I made a video, and I think the best thing, if people are like, okay, well, you've told me that The Rock is the Antichrist, I'd like to see a bit of proof. Well, I made a video which has all the best proof. It's very difficult to put the proof into words because it's things that are in the media, it's things he's involved with, it's things he's said, and it's best you look at this video I've made. It's called, what's it called now? Well, I think hopefully at the end of this talk we can put my YouTube channel up. I'll be brave and I'll tell you that I'm so absolutely certain that he is the Antichrist that I actually made a website with all the information on it, all the evidence on it. And there's a lot of evidence, by the way. It's very difficult for me to explain it on this radio show because a lot of it's visual and a lot of it is, it has to be put together. When you put it all together like a jigsaw puzzle, you put all the pieces together and then the actual picture becomes obvious. Now, it's very difficult for me to give you all those pieces verbally on a radio show for it to be clear enough and obvious enough that he is the man. But I promise you, if you look at all the evidence and put all these jigsaw pieces together and see them all together, then I think it will be obvious to you that he is the Antichrist. He is the man who's going to be fulfilling this prophecy. So the website I've put together with all the evidence is called therockantichrist.com. So it's www.therockantichrist.com. And hopefully we can maybe put that link in the video or at the end of the video, or so people can see it. But I have to make it clear, I haven't got an agenda to paint this guy in a bad light. I haven't got an agenda to spread hate or negativity. I'm not about negativity. If you look at my website and all the work I've done over the past 20 years, I'm very much about spreading positive energy and spreading love and spreading joy and spreading faith and spreading healing. This is what I'm all about. So I'm not interested in kind of giving him a bad name. I'm interested in truth. And so the only reason I'm sharing this information with everybody right now is because I know it's true. I know without a shadow of a doubt that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is the Antichrist. And so this is why I've made this website, therockantichrist.com, so that other people can open their eyes. I'm very concerned. In fact, I'm deeply concerned at the degree to which so many people love him and worship him. Because it's prophesied in the Bible that the Antichrist will be worshipped and that people will adore him, and he'll just have people, kind of falling at his feet, doing whatever he wants because they think he is almost a god. They think he's just so wonderful. He's their savior. And I'm very concerned about how many people, and I look at the comments on his videos, which to me are just blatant performances. His videos are blatant performances, political performances with subtle hidden messages in them. And I look at the comments and how many people love him and how many people think he is the solution and how many people want him to be their leader. And I'm very worried. So if you're one of those people, who loves The Rock, loves Dwayne Johnson, thinks he's a good guy, well, I'm not hating on him and I'm not trying to paint him as a figure of hate. I'm just asking you, be aware. Please don't be deceived. I just don't want you to be deceived. I care about you. So I'm talking to the people who are listening now. I care about you not being deceived. Okay, I care about children not being deceived, and I care about where the Antichrist agenda will go, because it will unfold. I can guarantee that the Antichrist agenda will continue to unfold. The only thing that will change for me spreading this message is that less people will be on board. The Antichrist agenda will go ahead, and there'll be lots and lots of people on board with him as their leader and as their man. There'll be lots of people on board with him, but I want to do whatever I can to ensure that as few people are on board as possible. Because if you're on board the Antichrist agenda, it's only going to a very, very dark place. And if you just remember what happened in Nazi Germany, and all the people who are on board Hitler's agenda, thinking that he was the man to change society, he was the leader they needed, he was the man who cared and who was passionate. Well, people are seeing The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, in exactly the same light. They're seeing him, and he's promoting himself as the man to make the change, the man to be the leader, the man who cares about equality, the man who cares about the people. So, I can understand that people are believing this message because he's an actor, and he hasn't really put out anything. He's been very careful because he's been lined up for this role. He's been very careful. He's got a very clean image. You'd say he's got a very clean-cut image to a degree, of course. He's a pretty tough guy, and he swears a lot sometimes. But he's got a relatively clean image when you think about Hollywood actors. Some of the things they get up to, then he's got a relatively clean image. But I know that he's into Satanism. I know he's a Satanist, and that's a brave thing for me to say. I mean, this is the most popular actor in the world, and this is one of the biggest, toughest guys in the world. And for me to publicly and say that I know he's a Satanist and I know he's the Antichrist, I do not say these things lightly. I'm saying these things because I know they're true, and I'm very, very concerned that people are not deceived, that they open their eyes to this con. It's an act, it's a performance, it's a political performance, a political agenda. The Rock has been preparing everyone for his political agenda for however long he's been in the public eye. And I think he's probably been lined up for this role of the Antichrist for a very, very, very long time. And so, the public have been prepared in many, many subtle ways. You may have noticed, and it's popped up in my YouTube feed recently, but he portrayed Barack Obama on Saturday Night Live, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. So it was a sketch on Saturday Night Live called The Rock Obama. And there was a series of sketches where he was sitting in the Oval Office and pretending to be Barack Obama. But he portrayed himself as this leader, this very desirable leader who's not going to mess around, who no one's going to mess with, who's not going to take any nonsense, who's going to be very, dominant and forceful, but very admirable, a very, a noble leader. So in these sketches where he was the Rock Obama, this is an example of how the American public have been prepared in subtle ways, and there are many other ways which are all on this website that I mentioned to you. There's many other ways which the American people have been prepared for The Rock to be their leader, to be their next president. Now, I don't know if he's going to get in. I don't know if he's going to even run for 2020. That's very ambitious, and he's not saying that he will run for 2020. But imagine if things get so dire in the next few months, if things get really terrible and things with Trump get really, really, really terrible, do not be surprised if he enters the race for 2020. It's more likely that he will be running for 2024. In fact, it's extremely likely, and I'd say almost guaranteed, that he will run for 2024 and he will come into power in 2024 because there is an agenda. There's an agenda in place. It's not just going with the flow and unfolding organically. The agenda, the Antichrist agenda, has been specifically and very, very carefully set up and orchestrated. And so certain things happen at certain times. So the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, has been in place. It's been planned for many, many years. Since 2011, when I saw this film called Contagion with, who was in it now? Matt Damon and Kate Winslet and Jude Law. I saw this film called Contagion in 2011. And as soon as I saw that film, I thought, right, that's propaganda. That's the agenda. There's going to be a pandemic. That was in 2011. And so for 9 years, I've been waiting for this pandemic to come along and unfold. And as soon as I saw it, the first time I saw it on the news, this pandemic, I was like, okay, well, what took you so long? It's planned. It's all been planned. The pandemic was planned. Even the rioting. Now, this may be controversial, but even the rioting in America has been planned, and I know it's been planned. And so the rioting makes people look at their nation and think, oh my God, this is a mess. Our country is in total disarray. There's chaos. We need someone to unify our country. So just like it happened in Germany, in times of great hardship and trouble and conflict and chaos, people look for a leader who will unify everybody, a leader who will bring people together. And this is the Rock's main message, that he is going to bring people together, and that we're going to do it together, and that we're going to have equality together, and that we're going to do everything together. He uses that word a lot, together. But his agenda may sound nice to start with. His agenda may seem like it's very humanitarian and very very compassionate, and that he cares about equality and he cares about these things. But we have to remember that politicians will use the words they need to use to get into power. They will look like the kind of person they need to look like to get into power. And this is exactly the case with The Rock, with Dwayne Johnson. He is saying what he needs to say. He's being the person he needs to be popular, to be worshipped, to be adored, to be loved by the American people and people all over the world, to be Mr. Popular. He is saying he's an actor who is putting on a performance, doing everything and saying everything he needs to do to be one of the most popular people in the world, so that he will have the support of millions and millions and millions of people. That's all that this is about. This is about political power. This is about him getting the support of the world, of billions of people, so that they are on board with his agenda. And at first, his agenda will seem positive. At first, it'll seem like, wow, this guy really is doing good things. Things are being sorted out. The world seems like, society seems like it's improving. He's making changes. It seems really good. But there will come a point, and this is prophesied in the Bible, I say 3.5 years into the Antichrist reign, there comes a point where people realize that he has a really dark agenda. And his agenda, as I've mentioned several times, is the Antichrist, the anti-Christian agenda. So there'll come a point where people will realize what his true agenda is, but it'll be too late. Just like it was too late in Nazi Germany when Hitler started rounding up the Jews, it'll be too late when Dwayne Johnson has got millions and millions of people behind him. He's got his army. He'll have his youth army, all the young people who are being prepared for him, who are being kind of prepared to do dark things and to behave in kind of less than humanitarian ways. The young people are being prepared for this, prepared to do cruel things, prepared to be violent. They're being prepared by the media. And so he will have his army of people who will do what he says. And what he says is going to be it's going to become increasingly less humane, and it's going to be increasingly anti-Christian. So as I mentioned earlier, there are several examples, and I only mentioned 2 of them, of anti-Christian messages in the media. Another one is the Hunger Games. Let me see, another one is His Dark Materials, which is on HBO. I think it's called Northern Lights, or His Dark Materials. And in that program, the magisterium, who are the oppressive government, again, they are representing the Christian establishment. And so the Christian establishment are being more and more painted as the enemy, so that people will want the Antichrist system to succeed. They're going to be seeing the Christian establishment, the Judeo-Christian right-wing capitalist system, they're going to be seeing that as evil, as leading the world into a dystopia, leading us into an apocalypse. And that's what the media's been doing, is painting this kind of worldview where the right-wing capitalist Christian establishment is leading us to the apocalypse. It's leading into this dystopia. And kids are really getting this message strongly in their programs and films and books. And so they want this other agenda. They want this other political agenda. And, this is what the Rock is going to be offering. And it's what he is already subtly insinuating in his talks. So if you listen carefully, and I'll come back to this point where I don't just want you to believe me. I'm not just saying, believe what I tell you, I'm right. Or even though I know I'm right, I can't persuade you that I'm right. But what I can encourage you to do is go to his Instagram profile and watch him like a hawk. Watch him and see if he's being genuine. And watch him for any signs of weakness, any signs of the act dropping. Because when thousands of people, when perhaps even hundreds of thousands or millions of people start scrutinizing this guy, and it becomes public information that people are scrutinizing him, that he might be the Antichrist, that there's this guy, this English guy on the internet saying that the Rock is the Antichrist, and people start scrutinizing him, then cracks will start appearing and the act will start dropping. And so, for those of you who trust that I know what I'm talking about, who can actually see that I might be right, then the best way to deal with this oppressive and dark agenda, this Antichrist agenda, is basically to shine a bright light on it. Do not spread hate, do not spread animosity, but just shine a bright light. Tell people to look at this guy, put this guy under the spotlight and watch him like a hawk and see if you can tell if he's being honest, or is he performing? Is he being a politician? Is he saying all the right things? Is he trying to win people over with his false humility? Because I see so much false humility with this guy. I see so much it's kind of sickly sweet niceness. He's trying to be so nice and show how caring he is and how humble he is and how compassionate he is. But he's overdoing it. And for me, he's shooting himself in the foot because he's overdoing it, and it's becoming more and more obvious that he's acting and he's got a political agenda, and he's just speaking politician speak, political talk. And some of his other videos on Instagram, he talks about, let me just say this, one thing to understand about the Antichrist is that imagine if Jesus came back to the earth, and imagine what Jesus would do on the earth. Imagine all the things, all the positive things he would do on the planet. Jesus would be a man of peace. He would be a man who tried to establish as much peace as possible, to spread the message of peace and spread the message of non-violence. So Jesus' message would be a message of peace and reconciliation. Well, the Antichrist message is the opposite message. It's a message of war. So the Antichrist is a man of war. And if you watch Dwayne Johnson's talks, listen to the words he uses in his Instagram videos. He talks about fighting energy. He talks about fighting energy, about a high output of fighting energy, about fighting this and fighting that, fighting for equality. And you'll notice this in politicians who are part of the dark agenda. They talk about fighting inequality and fighting injustice and fighting oppression. And what are we seeing on the streets all over the world? We're seeing fighting, because this is political speech. This is what politicians do when they cleverly want to generate more conflict so they can have more political power. When they cleverly want to increase the hostility and conflict in society, but what they want to sound like they're talking about peace, then they say that they're fighting for justice, they're fighting for peace, they're fighting for equality. You cannot fight for peace. You cannot fight. If you justify fighting, you will only increase the anger and the hostility and the animosity in the people. You cannot tell people to fight for justice and peace and equality and expect things to improve in society, because you won't. Because politicians, they tell you what the ideal is. They tell you this is where we're heading, this is what we want. We want this world of peace, we want this world of justice. And then they tell you we've got to fight for it. And this is why we never get there, because people think they have to fight to get to this world of peace, to get to this world of justice, a world of compassion, a world of tolerance. They think they have to fight for it. And so what the Antichrist will do, and is doing, is he's continuing to use this kind of fighting language about fighting for this, fighting for that. And what he's going to do, he's going to harness the anti-Christian sentiment, which is already in society and which is being kind of amplified via the media, via these programs I mentioned to you. And there's so many of them, but I just mentioned a few of them, by this anti-Christian sentiment, which is coming through the media and being aimed at young people. So he's going to amplify this animosity. So he's going to continue to talk about fighting, and he's going to point people to the scapegoat. So, we're fighting for justice. Well, who is it that's responsible for the injustice? We're fighting for peace. Who is it that's responsible? Who is it that's to blame for there being no peace? And we're fighting for equality. Who is it that's responsible for inequality? And so he directs people towards these people who are to blame and says, you've got to fight for it. You've got to fight. These are the people you've got to fight. If you want peace and you want equality and you want justice, these are the people you've got to fight, because they're the ones who are responsible for all the problems with society. These are the people who are responsible for the racism, the far right. These are the people who are responsible for inequality. These are the people who are responsible for oppression, the oppression of women. And it's them. They're the ones we've got to fight. And so he'll continue to use fighting language to feed this fighting mentality, because that's what the Antichrist will do. He will feed this mentality of war. And we cannot ever have a world of peace if we feed a mentality of war in the people of the planet, of the people in society. We need to feed a mentality of peace. We can't feed a mentality of war. We can't keep pointing towards the bad guys and saying they're the ones we've got to defeat. And that's what Hollywood movies have been doing for 30 years or 40 years or maybe longer, is saying that the good guys have got to beat the bad guys. They've got to defeat the bad guys. And so what we're seeing now in society and what's going to unfold is like a Hollywood script where the Antichrist subtly and very cleverly, and the media, direct us, point out to us who the bad guys are, who's responsible for this unjust society, who's responsible for the injustice and the animosity and the inequality, who's responsible for all the problems that we have, that we're trying to solve. Well, it's those guys over there, the bad guys, and it will be the Christians. I guarantee you, without any shadow of a doubt, it will be the Christians, because the Antichrist agenda is an anti-Christian agenda. That's why he is the Antichrist, because he stands for the opposite of Jesus. There's all these people around the world wanting someone to save them, they can see which direction society is going in, and they're worrying, understandably, they're worrying for society, they're worried for the future. Many people are praying that Jesus will come back and solve all of this. The Christians are praying that Jesus will come back and lift them up and take them up in the rapture and take them away from all this chaos and all the bad things which are destined to unfold. And if you watch society and watch the media and you watch the messages in the media very carefully, they are unfolding. There is a dark agenda unfolding. There is this dystopia, this 1984 style techno dystopia, techno-communism I call it. It is unfolding. And so lots of people are thinking, oh, we need help, we need a savior, we need to be saved from all of this. And so, a lot of people are looking to Jesus. They're looking to the skies and hoping that Jesus is going to come back and take them away. But the people who are not Christian, they're looking for a different savior. They're not expecting Jesus to come down on the clouds with great power and glory, and they're not even wanting that. They're wanting a man of the people. They're wanting a man to step forward, a normal human being to step forward who's a leader like no other leader, who's going to not take any nonsense, and who's going to steer the entire world in the direction that everybody wants. Excuse me. Everybody wants a world of peace. Everybody wants a world without greed and corruption. Everybody wants a world without evil and cruelty. Everybody wants a world full of kindness, genuine kindness, and unconditional kindness and compassion and love, where no one is excluded, no one at all. And of course, in a world like that, if we were just to snap our fingers and we have a world of unconditional kindness and compassion, then even the evil people, even the evildoers, the people who do wrong or do cruel things, even they will have unconditional compassion extended towards them, because then they will be seen for what they are. The evil people, the ones who have a dark agenda, will be seen for what they are, which is deeply, deeply sick, unwell, disturbed. Anybody who embraces evil and embraces darkness and embraces cruelty or anything of that nature is disturbed and unwell and sick. They're not the enemy. We have to stop this whole enemy mentality where we're looking for the bad guys and we're trying to point our finger at the bad guys in society and say, oh, it's them. They're the bad ones. Let's try and get rid of them, or let's try and stop them. Let's try and teach them a lesson, or let's try and change them. That's the good guy, bad guy mentality. And that's why we haven't progressed, or that's why we're not seeing the world we want, because we're too busy pointing the finger and saying, let's blame them. Let's make them the scapegoat. And it's always changing. In Germany, it was the Jews. They were the scapegoat. And, since Germany, it's been other members of society. It's the white supremacists. It's the racists. And it's going to be the Christians. I guarantee you, because this is what's coming through the media, it's going to be the Christians who are meant to be the bad guys. So we have to snap out of this mentality where we're looking for the bad guys and looking to blame somebody for the problems in society, and take responsibility ourselves for our own heart and make sure there is not any anger and hatred and darkness and any desire for darkness in our own heart. And this is what it comes back to, because the Antichrist will make you look at society and tell you that we have to fix society. The Antichrist will tell you that we have to change the people out there and stop the bad guys from being bad and stop them being so politically incorrect or stop them being so racist or blah, blah, blah. That's the Antichrist agenda. But what we really need to do is we need to see what is in our own heart. How much anger do we carry in our own heart? How much hatred do we carry? How much judgment and animosity do we have in our own heart? So the real work which is going to really change society is the work in our own heart. And you can't have a leader who will do that for you. You can't have a leader who will make a big sweeping change. You can have a leader who will tell you to look inside your own heart and kind of evaluate your own heart and be honest with what's in your own heart, and to see and be honest and be truthful about what's in your own heart, so that you can see, well, actually, there is hatred in my heart. There is anger towards these people or towards those people. There is intolerance in my heart, because that's the work. That's the work that needs to be done for this planet, for society to change. The work has to be done in our own heart. And our own heart needs to be purified. And that, for some people, that sounds like a bad thing or a terrible thing to say, that we have to purify our heart. But it's the most important and beautiful thing that a human being can do, is to purify their heart so it's not tainted with anger and hostility and hatred and desire, and the desire for other people to suffer. Because that's terrible. The fact that we human beings desire others to suffer, that's kind of part of the lowest part of human nature, I think, that we want other people to have pain. And the people who do bad things, we want them to have pain. That's not good. That's a justification for evil, when we justify wanting others to suffer. And that means there's still work to do in our own heart. So the idea that our heart can be a better place, our heart can be a more loving place, it can be a purer place, because it's through our heart that things come into this world. It's through our own heart that hatred comes into the world. Because imagine a whole world, 6 billion people or 7 billion people, and in the hearts of those people is not 1 ounce of hatred, and not 1 ounce of animosity, and not 1 ounce of hostility or greed. Well, of course, that would be beautiful. I mean, that would be indescribably beautiful. That would just be surrounded by friends, surrounded by people who cared about us, who were concerned about us, who wanted to help us, who loved us, who would stand up for us, who'd do anything to help us. That would be paradise. That would be heaven on earth. But the only way we move closer to that is not through political means or through some leader telling us to change society. The only way we move towards that world is by evaluating our own heart, looking at our own heart and seeing, okay, what work have I got to do? Am I still angry? Do I still harbor anger? And this is why Jesus said the most important thing we can do is to forgive. This is why I'd say maybe the prime message of Jesus was forgiveness. Because when we forgive people, we essentially dissolve the animosity in our heart. We dissolve the anger, we dissolve the bitterness, the resentment, all those qualities that we don't want in our world. We don't want resentment in our world. We don't want bitterness and hatred. So we have to kind of get rid of them from our own heart, purify our own heart. That's the only way. And people might say, oh gosh, that sounds so boring, or isn't there a quicker way, or isn't there a shortcut? There isn't. We have to look at our own heart, because through our heart comes what we see in society. What we have in the world is come through the hearts of men and women. They're only there. Whatever we see in society is only there because it's in the hearts of the human beings. You could say one thing. I'll say this one thing, which is, if people want a shortcut, and this is a shortcut. I mean, I've been on the spiritual path since I was 18 years old, into meditation, shamanism, a lot of transformational and powerful practices, all of which were beneficial, none of which had a detrimental effect, all of which were beneficial. But after 15, 16 years, God led me to realize that Jesus is absolutely true, that Jesus is a reality, and that if I just accept Jesus, then that's it. There's no more work to be done. There's no more self-improvement to be done. Jesus will do all the work. So God showed me this at the age of 33. Like I said, I'm 41 now. So after 15, 16 years of being on the spiritual path, of meditating, of trying to improve myself, of trying to kind of be a better person, trying to let go of all my fear. And I did a lot, a lot of it was very successful. But God showed me that, Jesus can do all of those things. And so, I accepted the guidance that God was giving me. So he led me to Jesus, and it wasn't through any other way. It's just he led me into situations where I had to accept that this is what God wanted for me. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was surrounded by lovely Christian people who are kind of singing the praises of how good it is to have Jesus in your heart. These were not dogmatic, stuffy Christians. They were good-hearted people who loved Jesus and who cared about people. And God wanted me to know what it's like to have Jesus in my heart. And so I just said yes, because I've never had a problem with Jesus. I've never been against Jesus or anything like that. I've always been open to Jesus because, of course, Jesus is the ideal human being. We all have to aspire to that. So I just said yes, of course. I opened my heart to Jesus and I invited him in. And then slowly from that point onwards, from that moment onwards, I realized I don't have to improve myself. I don't have to be a better person. I have to essentially just want to have a pure heart. I have to want goodness. You have to want goodness. You have to want a pure heart. You have to want love. You have to want these things to embody you and to be in your heart. Because if you allow Jesus to come into your heart, and at the same time you want what he has, you want everything that God has to give you through Jesus, then that's it. That's all you need. You need the desire for goodness, the desire for love, the desire for purity, the desire for humility. You need those desires. They're essential. So if you have those desires, and then you have Jesus in your heart, which is like, God's, what's the word, communication system. If you have Jesus in your heart, then all those things flow from God and through Jesus into your heart, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything except keep bringing your mind away from all the desires of the world, all the fleshly desires of gratification and materialism and power over others and manipulation. We have to bring our mind away from that kind of realm of selfishness. Bring our mind away from that and back to the realm of spiritual fulfillment, which is wanting love, wanting peace, wanting to share peace, wanting to share goodness, wanting to share compassion, wanting to share humility, wanting to understand other people, and wanting to help other people. If those are your desires, your base desires, and you have Jesus in your heart, then that's it. That's it. That's all the work. That's how your heart will be purified. And I know this with absolute certainty because this is my journey. This is the journey I've been on. I've been through this whole journey since the age of 17. And for 8 years, I've had Jesus in my heart. And I've learned how it works, what you need to do. And I've learned it's so simple, like I've just told you, to have those desires, the desires for goodness, to have those noble desires, you could call them. They're noble desires. So in those noble desires, there's no desire to teach people a lesson. There's no desire to punish people. There's no desire to fight anyone. There's no desire to hurt anyone. There's no desire to oppress anybody. You just want healing. You want healing for everybody, including the evil people, including the ones who are doing cruel things, across the world to vulnerable people. You want healing for them. You want them to know the goodness of love and compassion. You want them to know the goodness of God. And if you want that for all the people, then that's when the transformation happens in your heart. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful. And this is what we all need to do. We don't need to follow an outside leader. Beware of leaders out there who say, follow me. Beware of leaders and beware of the Antichrist. And beware of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Because it's the wrong way to change society. It's not going to work. It's a deception to lead people into darkness. If we go out there in the world trying to change things externally, we just go into darkness. If we go into our heart, and we look into our heart, and we ask for help with God, help from God, with our heart to make it a purer, more loving, more compassionate, more forgiving place, then that's where the transformation happens. And it can happen quickly. But like I say, the short...
And you are the man, being able to talk for 2 hours nonstop about this stuff. It's a rare gem to have someone on the radio show who can talk and give all this stuff. You are... Steve Merritt did it back in the day, but anyhow.
Thank you, Andrew.
Since have a few more minutes, I need to ask you a few questions about what we transition into. I mean, looking at the dates, and everybody has egg in their face when they give dates out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it seems like, according to this document that I have downloaded, Bo Polney, God's New Era, he's talking about all of the monetary system being changed from May 31st to September 18th, 2020.
Yeah.
And something big is going to happen. US dollar falls, begins to fall, hyperinflation begins, new gold silver monetary system is born, and
Yeah.
it'll be lovely if that happens because we have been slaves for so long. And regarding Donald Trump as president, it's kind of hard to see what the supporters will love him, hate him, because
Yeah.
do you listen to David Icke?
No, I've listened to a lot of David Icke over the years. I started reading David Icke books when I was in my early 20s, but then I didn't kind of give any attention to his work for probably 15 years. So I've kind of veered away. I veered away from what he's saying, but I know he speaks a lot of truth, and I respect him an enormous amount. So I know he speaks a lot of truth. Yes.
Right. And the thing about it is that there was a time period where Alex Jones would not let David Icke come on his show
Yeah.
because they didn't see eye to eye regarding Donald Trump. That all
Right.
changed, however, when Alex Jones decided to watch London Real more often.
Yeah.
That London Real thing is really starting to wake up a lot of people. And
Yeah.
David Icke, he was never censored in the past. He's being censored now. And regarding Donald Trump and what he wants to do for us, there's this one little thing that's getting to me. Donald Trump, the man, he wants to be the next JFK. He wants to release all this stuff. His uncle, for crying out loud, was the one who took Nikola Tesla's technology from the hotel room to release to the world.
Right.
Why hasn't it been released to the world? We don't know.
Yeah.
But the issue here is Trump may be having people holding his leash, and it was brought to my attention. And focusing on dark stuff is bad. I hate to do it, but I got to do it now.
Sure.
Back in 2017, Henry Kissinger met Trump, and that meeting, for all intents and purposes, was so Kissinger could tell Trump, "You will do what my minions and I tell you to do, or else you and your family will be dead."
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Benjamin Netanyahu is also having his leash held by Henry Kissinger as well. So we got to get this leash off of. Call me anti-Semitic if you want. I don't care. David Icke is all like, call me anti-Semitic. I don't give a shit. Well, see where this is going. And Alex Jones never talks about this kind of stuff. And,
Right.
well, I threw my 2 cents in. Do you have anything to say about this?
I only like to speak about what I know about with authority. What I really know a lot about. So I do my best not to speculate on things which I'm not too knowledgeable about, because I can put my foot in it sometimes. So with this area of things, I understand. I see there's a lot of truth to what you say. I don't know. I just don't know. I prefer to focus on what I know for sure, and also I think it's very important to be aware of deception. I think it's really important to be aware of being deceived. We can waste our energy on lots of things which aren't helpful for us to know. Do you know what I mean? There's so much information out there, and there's so much conspiracy theory information. And of course, a lot of it's conspiracy facts. I'm well aware of that. But we can fill our mind with information which isn't really useful. Do you know what I mean? And now I'm not going to judge what's useful and what's not useful. We have to do that independently for ourselves. So I try and only just kind of give my attention to information which I can do something with, which I can either use to help other people, or use to warn other people, or use to benefit my own life. And all the other information, I know there's a lot I don't know. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about a lot of these areas, a lot about the corridors of power, etc., etc. I'm not very knowledgeable.
Well, let me chime in for you.
Yeah.
The eclipse that's going to happen on April 8th, 2024, which is the day after my 38th birthday, I'm
Oh, wow.
going to go to Carbondale, Illinois, which is the crisscross point for the eclipse that happened in 2017 and the
Uh-huh.
eclipse that is going to happen in 2024. The one in 2017, it was, I gotta tell you, clouds ruined it. But I got a
Okay.
consolation prize. I got to see my nephew, but the clouds ruined the eclipse. But in the end, it doesn't matter because the big enchilada is that 24 eclipse,
Mm-hmm.
2024, when the end of the Roman Empire of the modern era, that is
Mm-hmm.
America, is going to
Yep.
collapse. And people like Brad Johnson, who channels Ladronis, have talked all about this. Like the Roman Empire of the modern era, it's America, it's going to collapse, it's going down, and Israel, the Zionists behind the scenes, they're going to manipulate things. And, well, Kissinger, his time is almost up, but he's trying to, in the Bilderbergs, get people like Zuckerberg and all the rest of them
Okay.
to um, continue what he started.
Right.
So
Okay.
that raises the question, what exactly can we do up until the time period of 2024 to
Yeah.
make sure that we get a smooth transition and humanity gets to experience a golden age?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. A really nice question. And um, people underestimate the power of faith and trust. You know, for many people, the word faith, it's just like, oh, just believing in some story, or just believing in some idea about God, or it's just belief. But actually, faith, when you have faith in your life, then more light flows into your life. The more faith you have, the less fear you have. So this is the individual journey that everyone needs to go on, which is releasing fear. We have to release fear. Like I said earlier, as a collective, if we've got fear in our hearts, then society is just going to reflect that, the fear that we have in our hearts. So as an individual, the most important thing we can do is have more faith, to trust that we are being looked after, that we are protected, that we are safe. Because like fear is like a huge crack in the foundation of the building. Imagine you're a building and there's fear in you, there's fear in your heart. That's like a huge fault line in your foundation. And so the most important thing we have to do, the very most important thing we have to do, is address the fear that we have within our hearts, and realize that we don't need it. We don't need to be afraid. So this means we have to trust, or the best thing we can do is trust. And you don't have to trust in the God of the Bible, or you don't have to trust in anything with a particular name. You have to trust that you are looked after by a greater force than you, a loving, benevolent force which is greater than you and which is greater than anything that's happening on the world. It's much infinitely greater than anything which is occurring in the world. And you have to trust that force will protect you, will guide you, will bring you what you need, so it'll provide for you. And this ties in with the whole mark of the beast thing. People are worried because it says in the Bible, those who don't take the mark of the beast won't be able to buy or sell. So people are afraid that, oh gosh, well, if I don't take the mark of the beast, I'll go hungry and I'll starve, and I'm going to be without lots of things. And they're seeing this negative vision unfolding. But actually, when you have faith and when you trust in this greater force, which I call God, but you can call the universal, call the creator, when you trust in that force, then you're not worried about lack, or not being able to buy or sell. You're not worried about anything in the future, because the greatest way of controlling you as a human being is making you afraid. That's the best way that anyone can control you And that's what the media is doing. And that's what the Antichrist agenda is all about. It's about controlling you through making you afraid. Because if you're fearless, then nothing can control you, and you can be courageous, you can speak your truth, and you won't be manipulated, because through fear, the way you behave is manipulated. So your behavior can be manipulated through fear.
Yes,
So,
and I would
go
like
on.
to say that
Yeah,
I was, I'm not going to talk about this all the time on all the radio shows that I do, but I was 302'd by the police when entities toyed with my mind, and
right,
that was really unpleasant.
right.
And I was in a psych ward for 5 days, and
Wow.
I'm thinking, what's going on here? It's an interesting
Mm.
fact. I was going to talk to Benjamin Netanyahu's son on a
Really?
Facebook messaging thing. I was going to ask him, do you realize that Henry Kissinger is the Emperor Palpatine of planet Earth, and he's holding Trump's leash and your leash? And well, I made up a phony question to get that, but
Sure.
because I was 302, I was not able to do that. So it
Right.
kind of makes you wonder, at a spiritual level, did something happen to keep me from doing that? But
Well, can I say this one thing,
yeah,
which you never know, because we can't know everything, but you never know, that might have been for your benefit. That might have actually been for your benefit. Because of course, at the time, it looks like a negative thing that you've been sectioned or taken into custody like that. But actually, who knows? You have to assume when something happens, if you take the perspective that it's for your benefit, then mentally you're aligning your mind with the divine. You're aligning your mind with the Creator, with God. When you take that perspective, you're aligning your mind with the light, with God. But if you take the perspective of, oh, this is evil forces trying to interfere with me or trying to stop me doing something, or this is the darkness, then you're kind of giving power to the darkness. You're saying the darkness has power over you. So if you don't even give the darkness the power over your thoughts to go in that direction. So if you make sure you've heard that saying, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Well, think no evil as well. Think no evil. Don't even give darkness the what's the word? I can't think of the right word. Don't even give it the credibility to be able to. Don't even give it a slight thought that it has power to influence your life. If you trust that everything that's happening to you is being orchestrated for your benefit by this higher divine force, by God, then amazing things happen. If you completely align with that perspective, then you will never see anything in a dark way, and you'll never be the victim. You'll never feel like the victim of the darkness or feel like you're being victimized by evil or anything like that, because your mind is with God, your mind is with the divine. And so that's a really important thing to understand. Trust that happened for a good reason, rather than thinking, well, maybe the darkness manipulated me. Trust that everything that happened, every little tiny thing that's happened to this point has been beneficial, has been God preparing you for whatever you have to go through in life. Because of course, we are made stronger, from our experiences, and obviously from some of our difficult and hard experiences. They make us stronger than the other experiences and the easy and nice ones. So I think everything is for our benefit. The important thing is to see it that way. It's really important to see it that way, because then we're aligning our mind with God's mind, and we can get His perspective on things. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. And well, we've kind of passed the 2 hour mark, so
Yeah.
people have lousy attention spans, and that has cost me a big audience in regards to YouTube subscribers.
Okay.
So it was a pleasure having you on, and you're a gem being able to talk so long with me being able to shut up and just sit back and relax and listen to your wisdom. I
Oh,
will make
thank you.
sure that I upload this by midnight tomorrow,
Wow.
and
Wonderful.
I will forward it to you, and you're more than welcome to upload it to your channel as well.
Thank you. I will, Andrew. I definitely will. Yeah, I appreciate
Yes.
that.
And Portugal, interesting country. When I think of Portugal as being a country that they basically, for all intents and purposes, legalized all the drugs and nobody's a drug addict. How does
It
that
really,
work?
yeah, that's a good question. I don't understand it, but it did work. There was an incredibly bad heroin problem in Portugal not so long ago. I mean, really, really bad. Like a certain percentage of the population were on heroin. It was terrible. And then they legalized it, and they implemented some very good systems. And yeah, the drug problem is very small, very, very small compared to other countries. So they did good there. They did a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, and America is the Roman
America.
Empire of the modern era. So,
Yeah.
but American patriots get to be brainwashed, and well, I have to do my part, and you do your part to wake people up. And it was
Yeah.
a pleasure having you on. I
Thank you,
will
Andrew.
upload this to YouTube tomorrow.
Okay.
Take care. Namaste.
Thank you. Can
And
I just say one thing, Andrew?
what?
I'm just incredibly grateful for the conversation. It wasn't really a conversation, but I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to speak with you, and just keep up the good work. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Enjoy Mercury retrograde.
When's it finish? When's it over?
I think it's July 12th, and I'm going to be in
Wow.
Orlando for the Libertarian Conference, and
Right.
that's going to be interesting. No
Yeah.
libertarian is going to be president, but libertarians, they basically, that's what you want to be. You want to be free, liberty,
Yeah,
free. Yep.
exactly.
So,
Liberty. That's what we want. We want freedom. True. Very
exactly.
true. Okay, Andrew.
Take care.
Thank you so much. God bless you.